Squad, halt. How about right? Load. Carry arms. Count by fours. Count 1, 2, 3. Head skirmishers on the left flank. Take intervals. March. Halt. Head skirmishers, commence firing. Skirmishers, advance.
Whoa. How was it even loud?
Scary.
Welcome to Fort Mackinac. My name is Emily, I'm a civilian interpreter here at the fort. I'm joined up here by Jacob. And today we're going to fire this cannon off for you, but before we do that, I just have a little bit to tell you about historic tourism here on Mackinac Island in the 1880s and how the tourists on the island would have been really uniquely interacting up here at Fort Mackinac with the cannons that they would have had here at the fort. Now, just to give you some background information, in the 1880s, which is the time that we're all interpreting here at the fort, Fort Mackinac is a peaceful post. So it's actually going to be serving as the headquarters to our country's second national park that was here on Mackinac Island for 20 years from 1875 to 1895. And while it is serving as the headquarters of that national park, the soldiers stationed here at Fort Mackinac were, at least in theory, sort of meant to be the caretakers for that park. However, you never really see them doing much work in the actual national park because they're still soldiers and they're still really busy here at the fort during the day with their regular soldierly duties. A few of these, they're going to be drilling on the parade ground every day for 2 hours. They're going to have a daily guard duty shift. They're going to do marksmanship training, but they're also going to be firing off salute shots from a cannon, much like this one. Now, a salute shot is just a blank charge. Again, this is a peaceful post. We're not firing off any cannonballs. There's no one coming here that we have to defend from. Typically, a salute shot is going to be fired off to celebrate or commemorate something. So a few examples of this, you see them firing off salute shots in the morning and the evening for the raising and lowering of the flag. For national holidays such as Decoration Day or what we now call Memorial Day. On the 4th of July, they're going to do a really big celebration. So they're going to do a national salute. So that's one salute shot for every state in the Union, which at the time is 38. But they're also going to fire off a salute shot to welcome the first boat of tourists coming back to the island after a long winter. By the 1880s, Mackinac Island was already an incredibly popular tourist destination. Tourism was already the primary business here on the island by then, and a lot of these tourists are actually going to be really interested in Fort Mackinac. Following the Civil War, you see a lot of people have a bit of a feeling of nostalgia toward the military. They kind of romanticize it a little bit. So they're going to be really interested in the fort here on the island. And the fort would actually open its doors to these tourists a few days out of the week. They'd be able to come up here to the fort and watch the soldiers do things like their evening dress parade. But they're also going to really love those salute shots that are fired off here. They become quite ingrained in the culture here on the island, not just for the tourists, but for the year-round residents as well. And in 1887, you actually see the War Department decide to revoke funding for these salute shots, mainly because they really just didn't want to pay for it anymore, and people were not happy about this at all. You saw a newspaper in St. Ignace running a story about this because people were so disappointed that the salute shots had been taken away. You saw the post commandant in the 1880s, so the guy in charge of the whole fort, Captain Greenleaf Goodale, personally writing and sending a letter to the War Department himself asking for an exemption for Fort Mackinac because those salute shots have become so important, again, both to the tourists but to the general culture here on the island. Luckily, about a year later in 1888, they were reinstated, and we still fire them off today. So, much like you folks have all come up here to Fort Mackinac today to go on these demonstrations and learn the history here at the fort, tourists even all the way back in the 1880s, over 100 years ago, were doing very similar things as well. So, with all that being said, I think it's only fair that in the name of tradition, we fire off a salute shot for you folks. How's that sound? Alright, so this is our model 1841 6-pound smoothbore field gun. This cannon would have had a maximum range of about a mile, which is about out to Round Island across the lake from us here, but it would have been a lot more accurate, about half a mile, which would be about to the end of the break wall. But the first thing I'm going to do to start the loading process of the cannon, I'm going to do something called thumb stilling. So I'm going to take my thumb, I'm going to cover this hole at the base of the cannon. This is called the touch hole. And this is going to ensure that no extra oxygen gets into the barrel of the gun during the loading process. Now Jacob is going to take this tool called an auger or gunner's worm. He's going to send that down the barrel of the gun and twist it a few times. And that is going to grab onto and pull out any debris that might have been left over from our most previous shot. Looks like he didn't find much, so now he's going to take our wet swab, which is just a bit of sheep's wool tacked to the end of a rammer. He's going to lightly dip that in our bucket of water here, and he's going to send that down the barrel of the gun. And this is effectively going to extinguish any flames or embers that might have been left over from our most previous shots to make sure the gun doesn't go off prematurely. Now doing this has created a bit of a vacuum in the cannon, and that thump was that vacuum collapsing. So now we know the cannon is safe to load. So Jacob is going to take our charge, which today is about 5 ounces of black powder wrapped in historically inaccurate aluminum foil. Historically they would have used a cloth material, but that tends to smolder and burn. We don't really want to send flaming rags over the wall into the park. But now he's going to ram that charge down the barrel of the gun. He's going to tap it twice a few times. And now our cannon is loaded. So now it's time for Jacob to prime the gun. So he's going to take this little brass spike. It's called a gunner's pick. We'll hold it up for you in a second here. But he's going to send that down the touch hole. And he's going to pierce that little charge a few times. And that is going to expose the powder inside for our ignition device. Now, our ignition device today, again, we'll hold that up for you in a second here. It's the same technology they would have been using back in the 1880s. It's called a friction primer. So it's a little brass tube with powder in it with a pin at the top. And where that pin and tube meet is a chemical known as fulminate of mercury. It is highly susceptible to friction. So when Jacob pulls that pin at the top, that is going to generate a spark that will travel down the tube into our charge, igniting it and giving us our big boom. Now, there's only one command left to give, but before I do that, it's my time to remind you folks that this is a real cannon. It will be a little loud. Most of the time we'll go out over the wall into the harbor, but I do still recommend that you cover your ears. With all that being said, there's only one command left to give, that is, ready, fire! Great, thank you folks for joining us. If you have any questions for me or Jacob, we'll be here on the platform. We'd love to answer them. Otherwise, our next demonstration is happening right now.
I can only cover one ear.
It's our soldiers' gear and uniform presentations. So if you're interested in that, you'll find